construct multi-religion roundtables, and then they promote interfaith dialogue and education in 17 countries in Latin America. Pastor Raúl is from, I'm going to say this incorrectly, from Guatemala. Good, that's what I was going to say. I should have forged ahead. And we will turn the time first to him. Actually, why don't I go ahead and introduce the following two speakers after Pastor Raúl. Monsignor Salvador Piñeiro is Archbishop of Ayacucho, the Roman Catholic Church in Peru. And Monsignor Piñeiro studied philosophy and theology at the Pontifical and Civil Theology Faculty of Lima, where he obtained a master's degree in education and a bachelor's degree in theology. He entered the major seminary of Santo Toribio in 1963 and received priestly ordination in 1973. He was the military bishop of Peru from 2001 to 2012 and president of the Episcopal Conference of Peru from 2012 to 2018. In August of 2011, he was appointed Metropolitan Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Ayacucho of, wow. Any other mistakes are because I did not have my eyes on yet. Huamanga. He currently serves as president of the Interreligious Council of Peru. And then finally, we will hear from Father Mauricio Granados, bishop and secretary, and I believe that's the former secretary of the, let's see, I want to say this correctly. Was previously secretary and now is supporting the ecclesiastical national courts of Costa Rican Conference of Catholic Bishops. And he was rector of the votive temple to the Sacred Heart of Jesus in San Jose, an archdiocesan priest and a lawyer by profession. We are thrilled to have all three of these distinguished guests with us, and we will turn the pulpit now to Raúl, Pastor Raúl.
Good morning. It is a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here. I'm very grateful to the university and to Karen, who extended this very important invitation to us, and we feel honored. Also to our fellow panelists, thank you for giving us this opportunity to co-participate in this panel. I would like to share some of what's going on in Guatemala right now. I'll be able to share some of the things that have been happening in our home country, some recent past about religion and freedom in our home country. But I would also like to speak about the present and also about the future, what freedom of religion may look like in the future in Guatemala. And I have a picture of what was the first board, the first committee on religious freedom, something that we motivated through the Constitution in Guatemala. This is the article. This is the article in our Constitution which contemplates freedom of religion as a very important part in our principles and also as a constitutional country. But history is different. Only Catholic Church was the dominant church ever since the 14th century, 15th century, and the principle of religious freedom was added through the first Constitution in 1821, and then from the 1825 Constitution, but it was through the new government, Guatemalan government, in 1843 that the new government signed a contract with the Holy See, and then that was part of the Guatemalan government. And it was in March of 1873 when Justino Barrios decreed that the religious freedom was part of the new government of the Guatemalan way of life, and that other creeds and religions would be allowed to express their beliefs. That's how the Presbyterian Church, evangelical from the United States, was the first one to arrive in Guatemala in 1882. right behind the National Palace. When you have the chance to visit Guatemala, or those who have visited Guatemala, because it's a country that was colonized by the Spaniards, there was a central square, and the Catholic Church was on one side, and commerce on the other side, the government, and then the city hall. And then we have that main square. And that did not allow for other religions to have a main area in downtown, in the downtown area of the city. Nowadays, this area has not changed. In the present, the last three constitutions or modifications to constitutions that have been approved, both in 45, 56, and 65, in those three constitutions, other religions were included in those constitutions, when those religions have freedom of expressions nowadays. That's a great advantage, but also that's a deficiency that we've also experienced, because the type of freedom that we had to be able to share in the good communion that nowadays we enjoy, that has not allowed us to understand the freedom of religion like other countries that have been under attack. When this situation started, we had to change. We have like a Cold War against freedom of religion. How did that happen? By using media, social media, newspapers, radios, public decrees, and others. In an indirect way, those who would attack religious freedom in their free exercise and in their free practices. There's judicial persecution against religious leaders because now they would press false charges against them, fake news also brought against them, and a total persecution from the financial sector, trying to not allow missionaries to have access to the country by signing or approving decrees that at first would look very noble, but the real objective is to destabilize the opportunity for those new religions to establish themselves in the country. And so these new religions will have the same freedoms that other religions enjoy. The first board of the Soil Society was November 19th of 2020. That's an example that we attempted to bring to other countries, where we try to foster dialogue and goodwill between interreligious groups. That's how I had the opportunity of knowing more about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and get to know to Karen and Steve when I lived in Guatemala. And these experiences have enriched the opportunity that a country that did not have, that had not enjoyed the same type of persecution like some countries in South Africa or Middle East, we were able to understand that there's a necessity for us to be ahead of the times and to understand that we have to be very clear against those groups that attack our liberties. This first board also started a process of education. We believe that it's very important that we have to motivate the right, the rule of law, and that's what started on March 20th, 2020, with collaboration from different evangelical groups to teach among their faithful the importance of freedom of religion, because we needed to help people be conscious and understand that. Even though the dialogue between majoritarian groups, Guatemala is 90% Christian, then we could say that 50% of those are Catholic. But the dialogue between the two groups is very open, is very good. The relationship is very easy to have. And other two groups that are added to the groups, they were given the opportunity, a good opportunity, but that's also, made us not have good feelings and not to accept religious freedom as part of the government, the rule of law. Something that's very important regarding other countries is that Guatemala mixes pro-life choices with religious choices. It is not common that both are part of the same country and that religious freedoms are on the same page than religious freedoms. But in Guatemala, when you visit people, government people, congressmen, or civil life, both choices are seen as just as one, pro-life and religious freedom. To us, in Guatemala, defense of life since conception and traditional family, conservative, man and woman is part of the same defense of religious freedom. There is not such a way, there's no difference between those types of religious groups, even though we have Muslims, Jews, Catholics, evangelists. Those have participated. We even had some Buddhist groups. Those are very small minority in the country. We haven't seen a major opposition from those groups. That's why government, especially this current administration, generated major attention. So those choices, the pro-life choice, had the support from religious groups. So Guatemala has been named the pro-life capital in South America. All religious groups are there. Those are part of the interreligious groups. And people would say that's very interesting of a mix, but that's a reality in our country. After that, we had the opportunity to see from the first time the nomination of a ministry, a secretary of the newly created Department for Religious Freedom. Now we have a first commissioner who hopefully that nomination will be respected by the next administration. That's our hope. And that's still in a process of being defined. We don't know how soon it's going to happen, but we've seen a major difference between the approach from the different parties, and they are now understanding that this commission may disappear in the future. And this was the first board that we had, with the first meeting that we had with the government. This was also with the Pan American University, and also BYU participated of that group and that part of that symposium. And finally, and to finalize, what's the end of this road? Where are we heading to? I believe we have the opportunity to share some time, that we'll find a time where we'll all co-participate in the unity and on this labor by understanding that there's a model, that there's a system that we all can apply together towards a common goal. We hope to be able to be part of this process. Thank you very much.
To el Monseñor Salvador Piñeiro.
Now we will hear from Monseñor Piñeiro.
And then we'll take questions for all three when we conclude the three presentations.
Is this yours?
Gracias. Vengo del Perú.
I come from Peru, and we have an interesting normative, Article 50 from the political constitution recognizes that the Catholic Church, from its beginnings, helped the formation of the nation. But right after, it has all of the religious liberties. That is why I do not feel I come from a place of privilege, but this is an opportunity for service. I come from Ayacucho, from the mountains, 2,700 meters. Between Lima and Cusco, it's halfway. We have a good climate, a good food, with a good bishop. But I come from that region that is still marked by pain. There is a great deal of pain. There is an irony. Ayacucho in Quechua means the corner of the dead, because 500 years ago, the Inca Pachacútec came through there and tithed the Guari culture with much death. There is a great deal of pain for many centuries now. But on May 18th, 1980, human rights were violated. Here is where we saw in the village of Chuchi the bright, we see these times of darkness that brought about much violence. 20 years where we saw death, we saw hate that wanted to be, and they wanted to implant the Maoista, where we saw people trying to bring us from the mountains to the city. 72,000 deaths from both groups. When you hear about the narrations of the Shining Path, it hits you in the heart. 71 villagers at the doors of the church, they kill them because they don't want to pay the tithe. And we see fear amongst the people because they have shown up with military presence and killed the villagers. We see these wars of hate. And to this very day, we have 16,000 people that are missing. I offered myself with the Red Cross, tell me where these mass graves are so that I can find and look for our dead people, and close the circle of grief. Nobody says anything. I would like to thank the International Red Cross that always supports me and helps me when we find some type of grave with 70 dead people. And of course, I do not have forensic anthropologists. I have 4 in the city. And I said this to a president. At the rate we are going, in maybe 50 years, I will be able to uncover the 40 boxes full of bones from all the dead that we have. And I've told them that it is important to close cycles of grief. I loaned my church to be able to have the services and the worship services of those that are deceased, and I am always with the Presbyterian pastor. There is a great deal of pain, and one day I had to give back the remains of a body, and I said to him, Constantino, here is your father. And the young man said to me, I will be able to celebrate Father's Day. There is so much sadness. There is so much desolation. I am always invited to the hearing hours from the I am invited in the delegate from the United Nations as witnesses. We listen, we see, and truly it hurts our hearts when we hear the stories, the horror and the violent stories, these ideologies that have taken our peace from us. That is why, thank you. There is a credibility in the church. Most of us are of the Catholic confession, and in that zone, there is a lot of the Holy Week is something that is celebrated in the nation. We see people come to God, and we give words of consolation and hope and peace. And in this situation between lies and hate that we see, it is so important to proclaim the gospel of Jesus, because the good news that Christ brings us converts our hearts and transforms society. This is critical. This is key. We must speak of Jesus so that our hearts are converted, so that we can transform societies.
Una hija de Ayacucho,
A daughter of
una
Ayacucho,
religiosa muy querida,
a religious participant, dearly loved, 70 years. She had participated in the community of the Good
podía
Pastor.
haber exonerado
She could have exonerated herself.
a las misiones.
She could have said, I no longer attend the missions. Maria Agustina de Jesús Rivas López, better known as Aguchita.
Así le decían de
That
cariño.
is how people called her.
Toda su vida
Her entire
en un
life,
trabajo de minoridad,
she was doing a work of minority, showing small,
cuidando de los servicios domésticos de la
showing women how to
iglesia.
do different
Y esta hija de
handmade
nuestros
things.
Andes,
This daughter of the Andes was working in the
con
jungles
los achánicas,
with the Achanicas, with the groups,
nativos.
the native groups.
Y viene
And
la asesina, fue una mujer.
she was murdered.
¿Dónde está la monja?
Where is the nun?
Que salga.
Tell her to come
Estoy
out.
trabajando, estoy
I'm
haciendo
working.
estos
I
dulces
am
para
making
mis
this
niños.
candy for my children.
Salga usted.
Come outside.
La bala asesina arrancó su vida.
And
Y
a
qué
bullet
hermoso,
ripped her life from her. And how beautiful that Papa Francisco, after he studied this entire case, he proclaimed her
mártir de la
as a martyr
misericordia,
of
testigo de la misericordia.
as a martyr
Por eso le pedimos a ella
of mercy and compassion. And we ask her to help us find the truth, that we might find this
perdonar.
strength from love to forgive. And this is what we can give as children of the church,
De la madurez
to
del
speak
amor,
of
que
the
es el
maturity
perdón.
of love, which is forgiveness. This is the gospel of Jesus. He told us that we must forgive. And that is why, from the pulpit of Calvary, the first word, Father, forgive them.
Que sepamos perdonar,
I hope that we may be able to learn to forgive,
vivir en el amor.
that we know how to live in love. And I would like to conclude, before they flash the card at me,
Como lo hacemos
as
en
we
los
do
Andes.
in the Andes.
Aputaitaiku, Guyapayaguaiku. Aputaitaiku, Guyapayaguaiku. Que Dios tenga
That God
piedad de nosotros,
may have
que
mercy
Dios tenga misericordia
on
y
us
nos perdone.
and forgive us.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed directly to comments from Father Mauricio Granados.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I am grateful for the invitation by the university and also the organizers of the symposium.
Mucho la atención una frase
There's a phrase that really caught my attention from one of the panelists mentioned today. I believe it was the representative of the European Union, who said that
libertad religiosa
religious freedom in the world is currently under stress. And I thought
era muy amable él de decir que
that
bajo estrés,
it was very kind of him to say under stress. I would say it's under attack,
porque efectivamente
because
creo que todos somos conscientes
I think we're all aware of the difficulties and backsteps in terms of religious freedom from throughout the world. We receive reports
respecto a los retrocesos en ese sentido
of all of the backsliding in different aspects, and not only from
conflictos interconfesionales
groups and individuals with interfaith conflicts, but also
anti-libertad religiosa.
state policies
Muestra un botón. Vengo
that
de
are
Costa
against
Rica,
religion. And just to give you some background, I am from Costa Rica in Central America.
norte da
Our in the north, we border the country of Nicaragua, our neighbors,
somos conscientes de
and we are certainly aware
no diría yo
of
comunista
the, I wouldn't say a communist regime, because what they have is something different,
persigue,
and which
que expulsa
is persecuting
religiosas,
and
bueno, a fenómenos religiosos en general
and removing Catholic priests and priests in general. And this is something that has really been very surprising in terms of its harshness and its inability to tolerate those things that are different. And that's the closest example, but we also have the giant the giant in Asia, China, which is a power that is gaining increasing influence in the world, and which is also showing some frightful attacks on all religious expressions, including against Christians in general. And so I found it something very basic that all believers, whether Christians or not, from any religion, we need to get together in the common defense of religious freedom. And for this reason, I wanted to mention one case in particular. And this was why I took the liberty to propose it this morning. And this is the defense of worship within the framework of religious freedom. Normally, this part of sacrament is something that is very well understood, always has been so. We know that within Catholic worship takes place through both public and private worship, through liturgy, through the sole priesthood of Jesus Christ. And in the Catholic Church, we have the sacraments, we have the official prayers of the Church, and other sacramental actions. For Catholics, the sacraments include baptistry, communion, penitence, marriage, and anointing the sick. And this is why we must understand that any attempt to intervene or change the sacraments of the Church are an interference with the worship of, in this case, with Catholics. And in terms of, and this is something that will have an effect on salvation, something that has been established by Jesus Christ and which is part of our belief. And so in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we're told that Christ instituted the sacrament of penitence on behalf of all of the sinning members of his church, so that after baptism, in case they fall into serious sin and thereby hurt their communion, this penitence gives them another opportunity to recover that, and the fathers of the Catholic Church offer this sacrament as part of this ability to overcome the loss of grace. So what I would like to say with this is that confession is part of Catholic worship. And this is in comparison with other areas that enjoy protection and that are very similar. Through the sacrament of penitence, Catholic priests, whether bishops or presbyteries, are required to maintain the form of the Church, which has established the way of administering the sacrament, and to respect its obligations, their obligations. And the most important thing is to maintain absolute secrecy or confidentiality in terms of the things that have been confessed. And so, as you can tell, there's some element of comparing between professional confidentiality, such as attorney-client privilege that attorneys have, or level confidentiality that psychologists and physicians have. And this is something that can be suspended either through the interested party or by some elements within the legal system. Catechism also says that this ministry, the Church declares that all priests who hear confessions are required to keep all confessed sins under strict confidentiality, and there are some quotes there. Also, they cannot use the knowledge obtained from the confession to affect the lives of the penitent. There's no exception to this, and this is called sacramental sanctity because it is sealed by the sacrament. Canon number 983 says that this confidentiality is inviolable and cannot be violated for any reason. And I think I'm going to get the red card pretty soon. So I'm going to jump ahead to the more legal part of this because I think you have already gained some understanding of this. So let's see. The crime of violating confidentiality is very serious for Catholic priests and is punishable by excommunication, which is reserved for the Catholic See. And so what this means is that if a priest reveals something that is confidential, then he becomes excommunicated immediately by order of the Church. And he can only be reinstated by the Holy Father, by the Pope himself. So as you can see, this is a very serious matter for us. But there is a problem, especially when there has been friction, because they say that a priest has learned about criminal offenses as part of the confession. And so these are elements where there has been a legal development of the protection of the confidentiality of confession, especially since they're countries without a Catholic tradition, and they have been analyzing this aspect. This is crucial for these types of confessions, and there has been a lot that has been developed in this regard. Great legal authors have discussed about the fact that we find ourselves before a point of conflict between canonic law and the national law of the individual states. It is interesting because in Canada, there was a case that caused us to look at one aspect of this sacrament, and John Henry Wilmer in the United States has given us elements with regard to the work that has taken place in Canada, and he talks about how it is impossible for a Catholic priest to be called as a witness and to testify about items that are part of his confession, or to report any crimes because of the confidentiality of those religious confessions. And I just want to say that, in terms of the jurisprudence of Louisiana from 2016 talks about this, and this is very important, but I'll close with this because it talks about the fact that not just in the United States is where Catholic priests are protected, since the Supreme Court says that when a priest, a rabbi, or a duly ordained minister acquires information about abuse or negligence of a person through confession or another sacred communication, then such person must report it. But this is not. But it is not mandatory to reveal things that were said as part of a confidential confession. There is a there are some leftist parties in my country that have proposed some legal bills aimed at violating the confidentiality of religious confessions. And there's another one that came just 2 weeks ago from the Wide Front, a party that is basically kind of semi-Hugo Chavez-ish, and another party that has, there's another party that has defended it, and which includes non-Catholic Christians in the national legislature. So this is a very important case for the defense of religious freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those three excellent presentations and messages. Ahora tenemos como 10 minutos.
Now we have about 10 minutes for, in case there are any questions.
3 minutos, digamos.
So let's say 3 minutes. So we can, all right, so 3 minutes for questions. You can ask your questions in English or in Spanish. Mr. Raúl Marroquín. The interpreters cannot hear the question. It came from the first religious roundtable that was established in Guatemala, or perhaps it was a government initiative which was pro-life and pro-religion hand in hand. It's just a statement. I didn't understand that very well. Okay, so the movement for religious freedom and the movement for life come from the culture of Guatemala and from the intrinsic nature of our culture. It is not related to any political or government movement. The government merely recognized it in a special act on March 9th as the official day of the defense of life and the family. And so it was established as an important part of this procedure, and this is a monument within the National Palace in one of the squares there. Okay, so it is not set forth in legislation. It is a formal executive order, and it's part of a law which was established on March, declares that March 9th is the day for life and the family. But the movement was promoted by the multi-religious, multi-faith civil board, but it is not something that came from the government or from any political party, but rather it was the very group itself that through its dialogue has created this as one of its principal topics that it wants to defend.